History's most consequential moments rarely announce themselves. There is no ultimatum, no emergency session, no presidential address. Sometimes there is only a convoy of unmarked vehicles crossing a Russian airfield near Orenburg at the dead of night, loading cargo into an anthem of transport which is transponded dark, climbing east, banking south over the Caspian, and descending into Iranian airspace before dawn. According to 3 independent intelligence assessments that reached Washington 72 hours ago, that flight carries something no revolutionary government, no regional power, no non-superpower state has ever possessed in the 7-decade history of a nuclear age, technology from Russia's RS, Arshabans Armad, the weapon NATO designated the Satan-2. The name was not chosen for drama. Satan-2, the SS, Sheba, was already taken. And the engineers needed a designation that communicated, with some fidelity, what they had built. Mach 2 terminal velocity. A 15 metric ton payload. A range of 1,600 kilometers, sufficient to reach any point on the planet from any launch site. 10 to 15 independently maneuvering nuclear reentry vehicles per missile, each targetable to a separate location. Fractional orbital bombardment capability allowing approach from any direction on the globe, including from the south, the one direction from which American missile defense is completely unprotected. That system, or its warhead technology, or both, is now reportedly in Iranian hands. Before we go further, I want to be precise about what this story is and is not. This is not a story about Iran acquiring a larger rocket. Iran has rockets. This is not a story about Iran's nuclear enrichment program advancing another increment. That program has been advancing for 2 decades. This is a story about something categorically different, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, the state with the world's largest nuclear arsenal, transferring nuclear warhead technology to a revolutionary Islamic government that is currently in active combat with both the United States and Israel. If the intelligence holds, everything analysts thought they understood about the limits of great power competition, about the rules, however informal, that have governed nuclear proliferation since 1945, has just been invalidated by a single nighttime flight over the Caspian Sea. I'm Professor Yang Xuqian. This is the Yang Report. Tonight, we do what mainstream commentary has not yet been willing to do, explain, precisely and honestly, what the saving air transfer means, why Putin made this decision, what it does to Israel's strategic position, why the United States has no clean military answer, and where the global nuclear order goes from here. Stay with me. To understand this transfer, you have to understand the strategic position Vladimir Putin occupies in April 2020, because this is not an impulsive act. It is a coldly reasoned decision by a leader who has concluded that the rules-based international order he is repeatedly asked to respect has already been discarded by the states that designed it. Putin's logic begins in Ukraine. 4 years of grinding attrition in which the United States and its European allies provided Kiev with hundreds of billions in military aid, intelligence, targeting support, and increasingly sophisticated weapons. NATO members trained Ukrainian forces, sustained Ukrainian logistics, and maintained Ukrainian resistance against a Russian military that expected a short campaign and receive a prolonged war of attrition instead. From Moscow's perspective, the asymmetry was glaring. Washington could arm Ukraine to beat Russia, and that was not considered escalation. Russia arming Iran, by contrast, was treated as a categorical violation. The rules, in Putin's reading, applied selectively, constraining Russia while leaving America unconstrained. The second element of his calculation is Operation Epic Fury itself. The United States launched a preemptive military campaign against Iran, a sovereign state with deep strategic, economic, and military ties to Russia, without UN Security Council authorization, without consulting Moscow, and in explicit defiance of the sovereignty principles Washington invokes in every other context. Iran is Russia's primary military export customer in the Middle East. Iran is a structural component of the Russia-China strategic alignment that has been consolidating since 2020. Iran's defeat is a first-order strategic loss for the Kremlin. The third calculation is the most important. Putin assessed, correctly, it appears, that Washington's response to a Satan-2 transfer, however furious in rhetoric, would stop short of direct military confrontation with Russia. It has to. Direct military confrontation with a nuclear-armed Russia means nuclear war. No American president, regardless of commitment to Israel, will risk nuclear war over a proliferation event that has already occurred and cannot be undone. This is the logic of the nuclear fait accompli. The technology is in Iranian hands. No airstrike reverses that. No sanction retrieves it. No diplomatic ultimatum undoes it. Putin calculated that Washington knows this. He calculated correctly. The intelligence assessments described 3 possible transfer types, each with different implications for timeline. The first and most alarming scenario is a complete warhead transfer, a fully assembled Satan-2 nuclear warhead ready for integration with an Iranian delivery vehicle. This would give Iran near-immediate nuclear strike capability, constrained only by the challenge of mating the warhead to a suitable Iranian missile. Given that Iran's Khorramshahr still falls within the required weight class, integration is a significant engineering challenge, but one measured in months, not years. The second scenario, assessed as more probable, is design transfer, the engineering specifications, technical drawings, and material science data required to construct the Satan-2 class warhead domestically. This remains catastrophic. Iran has demonstrated across 40 years of sanctions and military pressure that it can reverse engineer and manufacture weapons systems of extraordinary complexity. Warhead design data from the country that arguably leads the world in nuclear miniaturization and re-entry hardening would compress Iran's timeline to operational nuclear capability from Isuman. The first scenario, treated as a baseline by several assessments, is component transfer, specific physical subsystems of the Satan-2 warhead, most critically the maneuvering re-entry vehicle's heat shielding and the arming, fusing, and firing systems that represent the most technically demanding elements of nuclear warhead construction. Iran possesses sufficient fissile material, a 60% enriched uranium stockpile adequate for multiple warheads when further enriched to weapons grade. What it has historically lacked is the weapons design expertise and re-entry engineering to build a deliverable nuclear weapon. Russian component transfers would close exactly those gaps. The timeline implications are stark. Complete transfer means Iranian strike capability potentially within months. Design transfer means 12 to 18 months. Component transfer means 18 to 36 months. None of these timelines is acceptable. All of them appear to have just become operational reality. Now let us talk about the weapon itself, because superficial coverage of its specifications obscures the true magnitude of what has just changed. The RS, Ar-Shabas Armat, is the most capable ballistic missile ever deployed by any nation in the history of warfare. That is not commentary. It is a technical assessment supported by every independent analysis of a system. Payload, 50 metric tons. The American Minuteman SAM carries approximately 760 kilograms. The Satan-2 carries 44 times more. That payload capacity is what enables the system's defining capability, 10 to 15 independently targetable maneuvering re-entry vehicles, each directable to a separate location anywhere within the missile's range. Against a country the geographic size of Israel, 2,000 square kilometers, roughly the area of New Jersey, a single Satan-2 launch with 10 re-entry vehicles achieves complete national coverage simultaneously. Not partial coverage. Not coverage of selected military targets. Every population center, every military installation, every government facility, every infrastructure node, simultaneously in a single launch. The strategic implication for Israel is direct. Israel's nuclear deterrent, the Samson option, the threat of massive nuclear retaliation if the Jewish state faces existential destruction, depends on a minimum survivable second strike capability. Some portion of Israel's nuclear infrastructure and command authority must survive a first strike to authorize and execute retaliation. Against a 10-warhead Satan-2 strike, the probability that any element of Israeli nuclear command and control survives is, in the honest assessment of mathematics, vanishingly small. The Samson option, which has been the ultimate guarantor of Israeli security for 50 years, is neutralized by a weapon designed to eliminate all of its constituent elements at once. Speed, Mach 20 times the speed of sound, approximately 2,400 kilometers per hour. From launch point in western Iran to targets in central Israel on standard ballistic trajectory, under 7 minutes. On depressed trajectory, flying lower and faster to reduce warning time, potentially under 5. Israel's Aerosan, its most capable artillery interceptor, requires a minimum of 8 to 10 minutes of tracking time to generate an accurate intercept solution against a high-speed ballistic re-entry vehicle. Against the Mach maneuvering re-entry vehicle with reduced flight time, that requirement cannot be met. The physics close the window before the intercept geometry can be established. This is not a criticism of Israeli engineering. It is a statement of the hard limits imposed by the speed of a weapon. The Satan-2's most strategically significant characteristic, and the one least discussed in public commentary, is its fractional orbital bombardment capability. Conventional ICBMs travel predictable ballistic arcs, up through the upper atmosphere and down. American missile defense systems are architecturally designed around that predictability. The Satan-2 can deliver its payload through a partial orbit, allowing the warhead to approach its target from any direction on the globe, including from south. American ground-based mid-course defense interceptors in Alaska and California are oriented against threats approaching from the north and northwest. They are entirely unprotected against the southern approach. A Satan-2 launched from Iran, placed into a partial southward orbit, approaching the continental United States from below the equator, is entirely outside the engagement envelope of American homeland missile defense. The United States has no interceptors positioned to address the southward approach. None. This vulnerability has been understood since the Soviet Union first demonstrated fractional orbital bombardment capability in the 1960s. It has never been corrected. Iran with Satan-2 technology can threaten the American homeland through an approach vector that American missile defense cannot answer. This is why the reaction in Washington is not performative alarm. It is the rational response of decision makers who understand that the strategic equation has shifted in a way that has no precedent and no established solution. Washington's public response to the transfer has been conspicuously restrained. Where previous proliferation crises generated ultimatums, coordinated sanctions, and international coalition building, this one has produced carefully hedged statements about serious concerns and the need for further assessment. The restraint reflects a harsh reality. There is no viable option. A direct military strike against a warhead or its components is operationally impossible. The United States does not know with sufficient precision where the transfer technology is located. Iran's hardened underground infrastructure in the Zagros Mountains, facilities carved into bedrock specifically to survive bunker-busting ordnance, provides protection that available American conventional munitions cannot reliably defeat. Direct military confrontation with Russia risks nuclear escalation with a country possessing over 10 nuclear warheads. Diplomacy cannot reverse the transfer. Iran is not going to return the warhead technology. There is no diplomatic mechanism that undoes the technology transfer once the knowledge and components have changed hands. Washington is left managing consequences in a strategic environment that has no established playbook. This situation places the American administration in a politically untenable position. The public image built on decisiveness and strength collides with a demonstrated inability to act. Operation Epic Fury, designed to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat, may have accelerated it. The administration's messaging reflects this tension, assertions of resolve without corresponding action. For supporters of the operation, the possibility that it worsened the very threat it set out to eliminate is a severe political and strategic indictment. Beyond American domestic politics, the crisis strikes at NATO's foundation. The alliance depends on credible American extended deterrence, the guarantee that U.S. nuclear capability protects its allies. If the United States cannot prevent a PLO member from transferring nuclear warhead technology to a hostile actor during an active conflict, European capitals will question the reliability of that guarantee. That doubt is already generating urgent consultations in London, Paris, and Berlin. The long-term risk is a drift toward independent European nuclear capabilities, fracturing NATO cohesion in precisely the way that serves Moscow's broader strategic objective. The 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty rests on central bargain. The 5 recognized nuclear powers commit not to transfer nuclear weapons or weapons-relevant technology to non-nuclear states. Non-nuclear states commit not to develop such weapons. The framework has absorbed significant shocks over the decades. India, Pakistan, and North Korea developed weapons outside its boundaries, but in each case they did so independently. The PLO nations maintain, however imperfectly, formal adherence to the non-transfer commitment. That adherence was the load-bearing wall of the entire architecture. If Russia has removed it, the architecture does not bend. It collapses. The NPT's authority rests on consistent behavior by the powers whose commitment created it. Once one of those powers demonstrates that the transfer prohibition is a preference rather than a principle, the framework loses its deterrent logic for every other state that has accepted constraints under it. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt, states that have quietly relied on the assumption that great power restraint will hold, may now begin reassessing that assumption. If nuclear capability can be transferred through strategic partnership during an active conflict, the calculus of restraint for every hedging state shifts fundamentally. The result is not a single proliferation event. It is the beginning of a cascade. Once one major power breaks the rule, others may feel unconstrained. China could reinterpret its obligations in scenarios involving Taiwan or regional competition. Even if Beijing does not act immediately, the boundary of what is considered acceptable behavior has moved. And for states in the global south, the lesson from this moment is stark. Security guaranteed through international agreements and great power restraint is not guaranteed at all. The damage is not incremental. It is structural. And structural collapse of a nuclear non-proliferation regime, the framework that has, with all its imperfections, prevented the number of nuclear-armed states from expanding beyond 9 in 70 years, would reshape global security in ways that dwarf the significance of any single conflict in the Middle East. That is where we are tonight. The convoy moved through the darkness. The transponder was switched off. The Antonov climbed east and banked south. And the world that existed before that flight does not exist anymore.